Didn't look at him when he walked in. I heard the chair scrape across the floor, heard my brother settle into the seat 2 rows behind me, heard my aunt whisper something to him in that low, urgent tone she always used when she was trying to appear concerned. I kept my eyes forward. My hands were folded on the table in front of me, steady, still. That was the only thing I could control that morning. People in small towns talk. That's not a complaint, it's just geography. When you grow up in a place where everyone went to the same elementary school, where the pharmacist remembers your mother's prescriptions and the guy at the hardware store asks about your dad by name, word travels fast. So when my brother filed the civil claim in November, I knew before my lawyer called me. My aunt had already texted 3 cousins. My cousin had told her neighbor. Her neighbor's daughter worked at the credit union. By the time I got off the plane from Ottawa, half of Pemberton knew that Colette Marsh had apparently stolen from her own father's estate. Colette, that's me. I want to tell you what kind of person my brother thinks I am. He thinks I'm the daughter who left, the one who decided her career mattered more than Sunday dinners, more than helping with the farm equipment, more than showing up to every minor crisis with a casserole and a sympathetic face. He thinks I've been living some vague, impressive-sounding life in the capital while the real work happened at home without me. And to him, the fact that I couldn't explain that life in detail was proof enough that it wasn't real. My father died in February, 14 months before the court date. He went quickly, which was merciful. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in October, gone before the snow melted. Those 4 months were the hardest of my life, and I was traveling back from Ottawa every second weekend, sitting with him while my brother managed the property and my aunt made herself indispensable in the way she always did. Organizing things. Informing people. Making sure everyone knew she was at the center of it. My father had a will. He also had a small estate, the farmhouse outside Pemberton, a modest RRSP, and a joint account he'd maintained with my mother before she passed. The will was clear. The property would be split evenly. The liquid assets would be divided, with a portion held in trust to cover outstanding taxes and maintenance on the house until it sold. I was named executor. I didn't ask for that. My father chose it because, his words, written in a letter he left with the lawyer, he trusted me to be precise. "You've always been precise, Colette," he wrote. "You don't let feelings get ahead of facts." He wasn't wrong. What I didn't anticipate was that my brother would spend 8 months watching me handle the estate and decide that precision looked a lot like concealment. The claim my brother filed said I had transferred approximately $42,000 from the estate account into a personal account under my control. He had bank records. He had timestamps. His lawyer, a man named Gerald Ashworth, who wore his confidence like a second suit, had clearly done his homework, or at least had done enough homework to make something legitimate, looking out of incomplete information. What the records showed was accurate. Money had moved. What they didn't show, what my brother either didn't understand or didn't want to understand, was where it had come from and why. Over the 6 years before my father died, I had been sending money home. Not every month, not in any formal arrangement, just quietly, when it was needed. When the tractor broke down and my brother didn't have the cash on hand. When my father's dental work wasn't covered and he was too proud to ask. When the property tax bill came in higher than expected 3 years running, and my brother was already stretched thin with his own mortgage. I sent money. I didn't make a thing of it. I transferred it and I didn't follow up, because that's not the kind of help that comes with a receipt. The $42,000 I had moved from the estate account was, to the dollar, less than what I had put in over those 6 years. I had records of every transfer. I had the emails where my father thanked me, the text from my brother asking if I could help that month, the bank statements going back to the year my mother died. My brother had apparently forgotten all of it, or decided it was irrelevant, or, and this is the version I find hardest to sit with, decided that a sister who worked a government job she couldn't talk about in detail didn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. The morning of the hearing, my lawyer, a woman named Diane Fortier, who had been practicing estates litigation in BC for 23 years, and who had the calm, unhurried manner of someone who had seen every version of this, told me to wear something neutral. Say as little as possible. Let her do the work. You'll want to respond, she said over coffee in the parking lot of the courthouse. When Ashworth starts in on your employment history, you'll want to explain yourself. Don't. I know, I said. I mean it. The instinct is to defend yourself. Don't. The documents will do it. I nodded. She looked at me for a moment, then looked away. I've been doing this a long time, she said. I've had clients who were guilty and clients who were innocent and clients who were somewhere in the middle. I know which one you are. Just trust the process. I trusted her. I wasn't sure I trusted the process, but I trusted her. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Civil hearings in BC rarely have the drama of what you see on television. No packed galleries, no reporters, just a wood-paneled room with fluorescent lighting and a lot of people trying to look more confident than they felt. My brother sat with my aunt behind the plaintiff's table. He had dressed formally, which surprised me. He almost never wore a tie. My aunt had her hands folded in her lap. She nodded at me when I came in, the way you nod at someone you've decided to be civil to despite everything. I didn't nod back. I took my seat, folded my hands on the table, and looked at the front of the room. When my brother took the stand, I made myself stay still. He spoke clearly, which surprised me too. He said that since our father's death, I had managed the estate in a manner that was neither transparent nor accountable. He said that I had resisted his requests for documentation. He said that the transferred funds represented assets that should have been equally distributed and that my actions constituted a breach of my fiduciary duty as executor. He said, and this is the part that I still hear sometimes, quietly when I'm not expecting it, that he had always known I cared more about my life in Ottawa than I ever cared about the family I'd left behind. He said it matter-of-factly, not with cruelty, just as a statement of something he considered obvious. I kept my hands folded. I kept my hands folded. I kept my eyes forward. Ashworth was good. I'll give him that. He had a methodical quality that played well in a room. He moved through documents slowly, building the picture piece by piece, giving the judge time to follow. When it was my turn on the stand, he approached with a quality that wasn't quite a smirk, but was adjacent to one. He asked me to describe my employment. I work for the federal government, I said. In what capacity? Analysis and operations. Can you be more specific? Not in this setting, no. He let the pause breathe. It was a deliberate technique. Silence to imply evasion. I'd sat across from people who were much better at it. Ms. Marsh, he said, you're asking this court to accept that you transferred $42,000 from your late father's estate for legitimate reasons, but you're unable to provide documentation of your own income, your own employment status, or any verifiable evidence that the contributions you claim to have made were real. I have provided documentation, I said. Bank transfer records, email correspondence, and text message logs covering a 6-year period. My lawyer submitted them this morning. What you submitted, he said, are records of transfers. What you haven't provided is any context that would make those transfers verifiable. Anyone can move money. What we're asking is whether the money you moved from your father's estate was yours to move. It was, I said, based on your word. Based on 6 years of records, I said. He shifted. Ms. Marsh, you've described your work as analysis and operations. Is it possible that the vagueness of that description is intentional? That you've cultivated a kind of professional mystery specifically because it's useful, because it allows you to make claims that can't be easily checked? I looked at him for a moment. No, I said. Then help us understand. What, specifically, do you do for the federal government? I'm not able to answer that question in this proceeding, because it's classified. Yes. He turned to face the room as though my answer had confirmed something. I watched him do it and I kept my hands still and I waited. My lawyer had told me about the envelope 3 weeks before the hearing. She had made some calls. She knew people. She'd done contract work for the federal government years ago, before she moved into private practice, and she still had contacts in places that were useful. She told me that she had been able to obtain a document that would clarify my employment status and record of service in a format that could be entered into evidence without compromising anything sensitive. What kind of document? I asked. A letter, she said, on official letterhead, signed and sealed. I'll be submitting it through the court. You don't need to do anything. Will it be enough? She looked at me. Colette, she said, it'll be more than enough. I didn't ask more questions. I trusted her. The morning of the hearing, I watched her place a sealed envelope on the table beside her files. It was unremarkable, standard government envelope, the kind that could have held anything. My brother's lawyer didn't look at it. My brother didn't look at it. My aunt was busy arranging her jacket. I looked at the back of the courtroom. The judge, the Honorable Raymond Kirby, who had been on the bench in this jurisdiction for 19 years, received the envelope from my lawyer near the end of the morning session. She approached the bench and spoke to him quietly, the way lawyers do when they're handing up something that requires a moment of private consideration. She handed him the envelope. He opened it. I don't know exactly what he read. I know what the letter contained in general terms, because my lawyer told me afterward. I know that it described my title, my years of service, my clearance level, and in the careful language that government documents use for these things, the nature of my contributions over the past decade. I know that it was signed by someone whose name my lawyer said she wasn't at liberty to share with me directly, but whose position was significant enough that Judge Kirby set the letter down and sat very still for a moment. He removed his glasses. He cleaned them slowly with the cloth he kept on the bench. Then he put them back on and looked at the room. I'm going to call a brief recess, he said. His voice was even, professional. But there was something in it, a stillness that hadn't been there before. When we reconvene, I'd like to speak to both counsel in chambers. The recess was 40 minutes. My brother leaned over to my aunt and said something I couldn't hear. She put her hand on his arm. Ashworth was on his phone and I watched him, and I could see from the way his posture changed that he was not having a good conversation. I sat at the table. I drank the water in front of me. I thought about my father's letter, the one the lawyer had read to me after the funeral. You've always been precise, Colette. You don't let feelings get ahead of facts. I thought about all the Sunday dinners I'd missed and all the money I'd sent without saying anything, and the tractor that my brother had fixed without knowing how it had been paid for. I thought about my mother, who had understood without being told, who had once sat beside me on the back porch and said, "You're going to do something that matters, aren't you?" She'd said it the way you say something you already know to be true. I thought, yes, Mom, I did. When the session reconvened, Judge Kirby's manner had changed. Not dramatically, he was a composed man, experienced in not showing too much. But the cadence was different. He moved through what followed with the careful precision of someone who had adjusted his understanding of the situation and was proceeding accordingly. He noted that the documentation submitted by my lawyer was, he paused, briefly, highly clarifying. He noted that the transfer records I had provided established a clear pattern of financial contributions to the estate prior to my father's death that predated and exceeded the amount in question. He noted that no evidence had been presented that established a breach of fiduciary duty and that the claim rested primarily on inference he found in my favor. He also noted, in language that was polite but not ambiguous, that the claim appeared to have been filed without adequate review of the available financial record and that my brother's counsel would have benefited from a more thorough examination of the documents that were, in fact, obtainable before any action was taken. Ashworth did not look at me when the ruling came. My brother did. He looked at me the way people look when the world has reorganized itself into a shape they don't recognize. Not angry, exactly. Confused. Like he was trying to find the version of me he'd always had. The one who had left, who was vague, who didn't quite count. And it wasn't where he'd left it. I didn't give him anything. I gathered my notebook and my water bottle and I stood up. In the hallway afterward, my aunt approached me. She had the careful, reformulating expression of someone revising their position in real time. "Colette," she said, "I want you to know that I never thought—" "I know," I said. "Your brother was worried. He was grieving. He didn't." "I know," I said again, not unkindly, just clearly. She stopped. She looked at me for a moment and I saw something cross her face. Not exactly recognition, but something close to it. Like she was seeing for the first time that the person standing in front of her was not the version she'd been imagining. I told her to take care of herself. I meant it. My brother caught up to me in the parking lot. He called my name and I stopped, because you stop. Because whatever has happened, whatever has been said in a courtroom, he is still my brother and my father loved him, and that means something. He came up beside me and he stood there for a moment without saying anything. He looked older than he had inside. The tie was already loosened. "I didn't know," he said finally. "I know you didn't. You could have told me." I looked at him. The sky above the parking lot was the flat white of an overcast February, the kind of day that feels like it's waiting for something. A crow was walking along the top of a low concrete wall nearby, moving with that particular crow confidence, unbothered. "Some things," I said, "I don't get to tell." He was quiet for a moment. "All that money. Over the years, you never said anything. You never asked where it came from." He looked away. His jaw moved the way jaws move when someone is working out what to say and not finding it. "Dad knew?" he asked. "Dad knew." He nodded, slowly, the way you nod when you're absorbing something that is going to take time to fully land. I thought you'd left us behind, gone off to your important life, and I know what you thought, I said. Not harshly, just simply. He looked at me again, and I saw in his face the brother I grew up with. The one who used to bring me hot chocolate in winter when I was studying, who carried my mother's groceries without being asked, who cried harder than anyone at our father's funeral even though he tried not to. He was still that person. He'd just let grief and resentment build something on top of him that looked from the outside like certainty. I felt tired. Not angry. Tired. I have a flight, I said. Colette. We'll talk, I said. Colette, we'll talk, I said. Later, when we're both ready. I meant it. I'll call you. He nodded. I turned and walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a while before starting the engine. The parking lot was mostly empty now. Someone had left a Tim Hortons cup on the curb near the exit. The crow from earlier had made its way down from the wall and was investigating it with professional thoroughness. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out the small pin I kept there. Silver. Simple. A form that, if you knew what it was, you knew what it meant. If you didn't, it was just metal. I held it in my palm and looked at it for a moment. My lawyer had asked me once, early on, why I hadn't just explained everything up front. Told my brother, told my aunt, laid it all out. I'd thought about how to answer that and said, because some of the value of what I do lives in the silence around it. You can't partially disclose. You're either in or you're out. She'd nodded like she understood. I think she did. I put the pin back in my pocket. I started the car. There's a particular feeling that comes not from proving someone wrong, but from simply being seen accurately, finally, after a long time of being misread. It's quieter than vindication. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like setting something heavy down, something you'd been carrying so long you'd stop noticing the weight of it. I pulled out of the parking lot and onto the highway. The mountains were there, the way they always are in that part of British Columbia, enormous and indifferent and permanent. I'd grown up looking at them, and somehow, no matter how long I spent away, they always looked exactly like home. I turned on the radio. I drove north. The books, as far as I was concerned, were balanced. I thought a lot about what my brother actually did wrong. Not the lawsuit, that was just paperwork. What he did wrong was decide, quietly and completely, that he already knew who I was. That's a different kind of mistake. It's the kind that doesn't announce itself. It just settles in, over years, and by the time it causes real damage, it feels like common sense. He watched me leave for Ottawa at 24, and he built a version of me out of what was missing. The missed Christmases, the vague job title, the absence at moments that mattered. He stacked those things up and eventually they became a person. Someone careless, someone checked out, someone who had chosen ambition over family. And once he believed in that person, everything fit. The money I'd sent didn't register as generosity. It registered as guilt money, or obligation, or something that didn't count because it came without presence. The silence I kept about my work wasn't discretion, it was evasion. Every piece of evidence that might have complicated his version of me got absorbed into it instead. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the cruelty of what he did. Because I don't think it was cruelty, not really. It was certainty. And certainty, when it's wrong, is one of the most expensive things a person can carry. My father understood something about this. He didn't talk about it in those terms, but I could see it in the way he operated. He never assumed he knew the full picture. He asked questions until he did. When I told him, years ago, the broad outline of the work I'd moved into, just enough for him to understand why I couldn't explain the rest, he sat with it for a while and then said, "Okay, I trust that you're doing something that matters." That was it. No interrogation, no resentment. Just a decision to extend trust further than his information reached. That's an act of intelligence, I think. Real intelligence. Not the kind that accumulates facts, but the kind that knows the limits of what it can see. My brother is not a stupid man, but that particular kind of intelligence, the kind that holds its own conclusions loosely and stays genuinely open to being wrong, that one took him longer. I don't say that to be hard on him. I say it because I think it's the most important thing any of us can develop. The willingness to ask, before we're certain, what am I not seeing? What has this person done that I haven't accounted for? What would it mean if I'm wrong? Diane knew to ask those questions. She built her entire case on the premise that the full picture was more complicated than the surface, and she was right, and that discipline, that refusal to stop at the obvious, is what changed the outcome in that courtroom. What I hope, when I think about my brother now, is that something shifted for him in that parking lot. Not dramatically, not overnight, just a small loosening of the certainty, enough to leave room for the person I actually am instead of the one he'd decided on. Because the thing about being misread by someone you love is that it doesn't stop hurting just because you win. You win and you drive home and you're still sitting with the fact that someone who shared a childhood with you, who knows your laugh and your habits and your mother's face, looked at your whole life and decided it didn't add up. That takes time to set down. But you do set it down. And when you do, what you're left with is something quieter and more durable than being right. You're left with the knowledge that you stayed honest, that you didn't compromise who you were to manage someone else's comfort, that when it mattered, you let the truth speak at its own pace and in its own way. The books were balanced. That's enough.